The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcast articles and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably familiar with Barry-Wehmiller for ideas about leadership, people-centric culture, and the way it can transform any organization. Our CEO Bob Chapman calls it truly human leadership. But if you're not familiar with what Barry-Wehmiller does as a company, we're mostly in the manufacturing business. Through 10 divisions, we deliver capital equipment and engineering solutions for a variety of industries. One of those divisions is Accraply, headquartered in Minneapolis. Accraply designs and manufactures machines which convert labels and apply them to products. Most likely the label on the soda or water bottle you drank out of today was touched by an Accraply machine. Barry-Wehmiller is blessed with many great leaders throughout our companies, made up of over 8,000 team members worldwide. And one of those leaders is Seamus Lafferty, president of Accraply. Seamus is originally from Dunfanaghy, a small village in County Donegal in the northwest of Ireland. A few months ago, he gave a talk as part of Barry-Wehmiller's Leadership Speaker Series in our St. Louis corporate office. Seamus very candidly shared his story with us, and we want to share it with you. As president of Accraply, Seamus is responsible for more than 200 lives in his care. His story is filled with insight into what it means to be a truly human leader, one who is learning something new every day as he takes very seriously his responsibility for those lives. But the story you're about to hear is not just about Seamus. It's about the people who positively impacted his life, and in turn the people whose lives he can positively impact. What you will hear are excerpts from a much larger discussion of how leadership is a journey. It's a story that is always evolving and developing, and is a work in progress. So here's Seamus Lafferty's leadership journey. Hopefully it'll give you some encouragement while you are on yours.
I feel that I am incredibly early in my leadership journey. I feel that my learnings, my study, my experiences are still too primitive, still too young to come into this bastion of leadership that Barry-Wehmiller has become. And I'm genuine about that. I don't feel equipped to come and speak to an audience in Barry-Wehmiller about leadership. So why am I here then? Well, I'm here because, first of all, Maria doesn't take no for an answer. Right? But secondly, as I thought about it, I realized it may be okay for me to come and be my babbling self. It may be okay for me to come and tell you where I'm really at on my leadership journey. It may be okay for me to come and be vulnerable. It may be okay for me to show up and admit the fact that I don't have all the answers all the time. So, and as I further thought about it, I came to think about my journey and how I got here, and my path is a fairly unlikely one. My path is probably unique to me. So, my first point is that my leadership thesis is still developing. I am still trying to find a place in my thinking for the experiences that I've had. And I'm not afraid to admit that. Every single day I learn. Every single day I learn. I have seen leadership challenge some of the smartest people I know, some of the most thoroughly good people that I know. And so I know we shouldn't take leadership for granted. And the concept of truly human leadership is so remarkably simple, right? It's not a complicated concept, and yet it is something that we actually have to work at. As natural as it should be to all of us, and many times it is natural, but then sometimes we have to work at it. Sometimes we have to reinforce it within ourselves, and sometimes we have to reinforce it within others around us. So, leadership, and the topic of leadership is an interesting one. Now, you asked me to tell my story, and instinctively that takes you start to think about the beginning of your story, right? And you go back to the beginning and you work your way through chronologically. Well, I have to start. Actually, I'll bring you back to the beginning in a second, but I have to start in the here and now. Because the here and now for me is an amazing place that I never really knew existed for me. I'm still coming to grips with it. I'm in a new role now for about the last 6 months or so. And it has been an amazing experience. I can honestly stand in front of you today and tell you that I love what I do. I can't imagine being anywhere else or doing anything else that I could get more from than where I sit right now. And I can say that because I am incredibly proud to work with 200 people at Accraply, and many more than that in the broader Barry-Wehmiller community. But within Accraply, there are 200 amazing people. People who are passionate about what they do, people who are passionate about our customers, people who are passionate about each other, people that are passionate about the vision that we're developing for the company that we want to become. It is all about people. It is so much more about the people than about the machines that we build. So it occurred to me, as I thought through it, that I would not be where I am today but for the people along the way who believed in me. People who gave me opportunities. People who bet on me at various steps along the way. And that's probably been the big learning that I've taken from this exercise of preparing for this conversation today. So, the beginning for me takes us to a little island called Ireland, a little teddy bear-shaped island. It's about 300 miles long. It's about 175 miles wide. It's about the size of the state of Indiana. It has a little over 6 million people on the island, just about the population of the state of Indiana. But it's home. This is where I come from. And it's a little bit of what I am, actually. Irish people were very attached to the land. We're attached to place. We have a strong sense of place. A poet called John B. Keane once wrote a play called The Field. It was turned into a movie in the 90s. And in that play is a line, if I can remember it, it says, I've watched this field for 40 years, and my father before me watched it for 40 more. I know every rib of grass and every thistle and every blackthorn bush that bounds it. I have family in this part of Ireland who have traveled very little outside this part of Ireland. But the lifestyle and the outlook and the attachment to place, strong sense of identity, not living your world on plastic, is what this part of Ireland is all about. It's wholesome and genuine and real. This is the date that I decided to put on the beginning of my leadership journey. And the reason is because it was on that date that my mother passed away. I was 15. I was the oldest of the 6. My sister was 5. My mother had been quite ill from the point where my sister was born. I was the oldest by about 3 years, So my mother and I were as tight could possibly be. One Saturday morning, she wasn't feeling well. And so my father told me to go down to the bedroom. My mother wanted to see me for something. So I went down, and I was really quite taken aback by what I saw. And I ran back and I said to my father, go get the doctor. And it was, before cell phones in Ireland at least. And we called the doctor's house, and the wife said, oh, he's going to get a haircut. So my father jumped in the car to go find the doctor at the hairdresser's, the barber shop. It all seems crazy all these years later. But that's what we did, because we wouldn't have thought to call the ambulance, or because that would have been, we just didn't understand what was going on. He didn't appreciate, I guess, what was going on, even though I had some sense that my mother wasn't doing well. So 15 minutes later, my mother passed away in my arms. Now, my 4 brothers and my sister were playing soccer, football in our world, on the front lawn. And when I say I grew up fast, the day that I explained to a 80-year-old lady that her daughter just passed away, and to a 5-year-old little girl that she was never going to see her mother again, that gives me the context against which I measure everything else that I encounter. So today, nothing in business phases me, because I put it in the context of things that have impacted me. And I only tell you that because it is part of what I am. It is part of who I am. And I'm probably easier understood when you know that. But it was also a great privilege. It is not something it's just a privilege. It's just something that I'm very comfortable with, and wouldn't have had it any other way. But that which happened that day is what starts the journey that brings me to where I am today. And good grief, you're all sitting in this room listening to me. One of the things I remember about this and the 2 or 3 days that follow when you have a funeral is you learn a lot, right? You learn about family and the importance of family. You learn about the importance of community and neighbors and friends. You develop a faith, and that becomes important to you. So you learn a lot. In my case, I learned to stop thinking about myself. I learned a fair old amount about parenting, right? Bob always talks about parenting. I don't have kids of my own, but I got a fair old dose of it back then, right? So you learn a lot, but the thing that sticks with me 27 years later is somebody that I don't know. I don't remember who it was, but at the funeral, in the graveyard, he came up to me and he said, "I worked with your mother 30 years before that in the local hotel," which is the only job my mother ever had, because in Ireland at that time you raised a family. And he said, "We didn't really know her. She was quiet. She kept to herself. But she was incredibly effective, because she used to go to the kitchen, and for some reason, she would get her food before the rest of us got our food." Right? Any of you that's ever worked in a kitchen, your waiter, you go in, or waitress, you go in and you yell your order, and everybody's yelling. Well, my mother never yelled. She didn't know how to yell, right? But she was incredibly effective in her own way. And I think that's always stuck with me, because I try not to be a yeller. Despite what you're doing to me right now, I'm generally not comfortable at the front of the room. And my mother wasn't either. You don't have to be the loudest in the room to make an impact, is a learning that I wanted to share. Talk low, pull people close is an interesting concept for me. If you're the leader in the room and you're the only one being heard, then there's something wrong. A year later, I met a stray American. And he came across this now 16-year-old who was running the family business that my mother had started. And he took it upon himself to think, God, if I don't do something here, this kid may never see anything of the world. And so to cut a long story short, the following summer, on a ticket that he bought for me on an Aer Lingus flight, I flew on the first plane I'd ever seen, never mind the first plane I'd ever been on, from Dublin to JFK Airport. And for 3 weeks, he flew me coast to coast in America. He took me to Vail, Colorado. He said, Aspen isn't the place you want to go. That's... So I had skis on me for the first time. I drove for the first time in Vail, Colorado. He flew me to friends of his in Sacramento, California. I got a taste for something for a world that I'd only seen on TV, right? Just an American showing up who saw something in a young kid that he wanted to give an opportunity to, right? A key point in my life where somebody gave me an opportunity that didn't really make sense. My first visit to the USA in 1989. I guess my point here is seize opportunity when it's presented, but give opportunity when you can, right? When I look back on that, it wasn't the price of the ticket. Even where I sit today, the price of that ticket is inconsequential. At the time, I thought, oh my God, the price of this ticket, and this man's spending all this money on me. And he was spending money, but he was giving me something more than that. He was giving me his time, and he was giving me insight, and he was giving me ambition. I don't know that he gave me ambition, but he certainly gave me ambition on a new level, right? So I feel compelled today to give opportunity when I can, because people have given it to me in spades. I got a taste for what success could look like, developed ambition. My goal today must be to help others develop their ambition. 1990 was a strange time for me because I'd had this American experience. I'd finished high school. I was really not able to get into university because I couldn't afford it. In the course of doing this, I met somebody who only passed away a year ago. Just a couple of days ago was his first anniversary. And he knew the struggle that I was having. And he said, you know what, if you want to go to university, you need to get to university. And he made it so. Not a family member. He made it so that I could get to university. I got enough money into my bank account every month to be able to make it happen. And I started university in 1991. At the end of my first summer in university, I needed to earn money to pay for the next year's university. All the rich kids were coming to Nantucket on a student exchange program, so I was coming too. So I did come. And on Nantucket, I ran a bunch of guest houses for this lady. I ended up doing that for 7 summers. And at the end of that first summer, I happened to meet a guy from Ireland, and you know, we look after each other, right? Turned out that he was the vice consulate from the Irish consulate in New York, and he said to me, have you ever thought about applying for your green card? And I said, no, you know, what's the point? He said, well, tomorrow's the closing date for the lottery. So he said, would you like me to have my secretary put your name in? 6 months later, I had my green card for America. And that was another key event, right? Because without all of these things happening, then I wouldn't be where I am today. I spent 9 years in university, folks. I believe in finishing what you start. What did university teach me? What it really taught me is to ask questions, and it's okay if you don't know the answers. Seek opinions and ideas. Be willing to revise your ideas and evolve your thinking. It's okay to grow in your thinking. There's always more to learn. Avoid the trap of thinking you know it all. Allow people to ask you questions, because you will learn from the questions that people ask you. What's not on here, but I was thinking about it this morning, create time in your day for thinking is something else that I learned in university. You know, it's one of the things I miss. It seems like everybody wants me to be making decisions like this. And sometimes I need time to think. We all need time to think. August 1st of 2000, I submitted my PhD thesis. August 8th, I was on a plane and came to America. My idea was to go back and be an academic. I enjoyed teaching. I had done a little bit of teaching. in university, and I liked it, and I thought that that's what I would do. But I said, I got this green card, and I got to use it for a year to get America out of my system. So I came for a year. I moved to New Jersey, and who did I go to work for? The American from all those years back. He was in the newspaper printing press business. He was in New Jersey. I discovered I hated New Jersey. Oh my God, it was such a culture shock. 3 months before that, he had just bought Stanford in Salem, Illinois. And I used to get sent to do month-end closings because they didn't know that an economist doesn't know anything about accounting. And I discovered that these people in Salem, Illinois, with 8,000 people, 2 pubs and 32 churches and cornfields as far as the eye could see, were far closer to the culture and the home that I had left behind than New Jersey could ever be. So I moved to Salem, Illinois, and I began 7 wonderful years living in that small town and working with some amazing people. October 1st of 2007, we had put the company on the market. My partner, the American, was in his 70s. I was in my 20s. And the business got to a point where we needed to do something. I needed to buy it or it needed to be sold, and we decided to sell it. And there were 2 suitors at the end of the whole bidding process, and Accraply was one. I won't tell you who the other one was because that's not fair. But there wasn't a dollar difference in the final offer from these 2 companies, not a dollar difference. And because I was staying with the company, I got to decide which of the 2. And I visited Accraply, and I met particularly Greg, but also the whole team there. And it was culture. It was the feeling that I got from people that is the reason why Stanford is part of Accraply and Barry-Wehmiller today. I've had 3 jobs in Accraply. I spent 2 years as the Director of Business Development for Stanford. That was because they didn't know what to do with me. They knew they kind of needed me around, but they didn't really know what to do with me. Then I spent 5 years as the VP of Sales and Marketing. And that was kind of the same thing, frankly. And for the last 6 months, I've been privileged to be the president of the company and have received nothing but support from Rob and from the executive leadership team at Accraply, and frankly, from a myriad of people. So what are my ultimate beliefs about business and about leadership and about how to exist? You got to be true to yourself. You can't be somebody you're not. You got to know who you are. You have to be self-aware. If you're not aware of yourself, then you can't be aware of other people. And if you can't be aware of other people, then you can't possibly connect with them and connect them with the vision and connect them with a path for the future. But it starts with knowing who you are yourself. Be honest about your weaknesses and your strengths. We all have them. I don't have any problem telling you what it is that I don't know and where I need help. And I find that to be the way to go, in fact, because when you do that, people want to help. Instill trust. How do you instill trust? A leader must be able to instill trust. I think you instill trust by being genuine, by being honest, by being open, by being vulnerable when you need to be vulnerable. And being trustworthy does not translate into being able to instill trust. They're 2 different things, right? So you can be willing to trust somebody with your life, but they may not be able to instill trust in an organization. You have to be open to experiencing culture in the little ways that allow you to understand it. I think I said at the beginning, I intended to say at the beginning, that truly human leadership is a simple concept, but it's also very simple to fall away from it. You have to keep reinforcing it within yourself and within the people around you. And one of the ways you do that is being open to the little nuggets that you pick up from people, but you have to be open to them. You have to be open to them before people will tell you that which they're experiencing and that which is important to them and the impact that you're having on them. When somebody says, my wife asked me the other night what it is has changed at work in the last 6 weeks because I'm coming home happy. That's actually pretty significant, right? And I have listened to Bob tell those stories, like you've heard him tell those stories, right? But it's only when you experience it yourself. It's only when you actually get it in your, you have to like internalize it and just get into your bones. You have to just experience it before you realize, my God, this is real stuff. This is truly human leadership. Mistakes that I've made along the way, occupying positions when they were no longer right for me. Position can be right, doesn't always have to be right. It can change and you can change, and sometimes you need to move on. Failure to spot insecurity in people. Golly, that insecurity does terrible things to people. And as leaders, we ought to be able to spot it, because the people who are insecure may be in the wrong place for them, and they may be in the wrong place for our people, and they may be in the wrong place for the company. And everybody's unhappy in that situation. Insecurity does things to people that can be ugly. When I fail to connect with, understand, or listen to people, and I have had periods of time, I think when I was most miserable in life and in business was when I was more focused on the numbers than I was on people. And there have been times where I have been there. I think one of the most impactful videos that has ever been produced in Barry-Wehmiller is the one that was made of Tim Sullivan. And when I listened to it, I wrote this down and I've printed it out on my desk. It says, allow people to do great things in their own way. I think that's a profoundly meaningful statement. But as I have been experiencing life in these last 6 months, I have been thinking, and I haven't got this all the way thought through, but it seems to me like sometimes before you can allow people to do great things, you have to encourage them to do great things, right? You allow them to do it when they know they can do it and they're ready to go. Sometimes before you get to that stage, there's an encouragement stage that you have to go through. So encourage people to do great things in their own way may come first. Praise and thanks. Your praise can mean so much more than you realize. And those two words, thank you, are so incredibly powerful. I hope that for as long as I'm working, I will find something about which I can be passionate. I can't imagine a job in which I couldn't be passionate about it. Be genuine, be yourself. Engage the greatness in others. I am just coming to grips with the extent to which everybody has greatness in them. Sometimes they don't know it. Sometimes it's not immediately obvious what that greatness is. But golly, if you can find that out and you can unleash the power that is in people, there is no telling what people can do. Learn every day. Love what you do. Back to Desiderata, the last line of that poem says, strive to be happy. So I don't know if any of that makes any sense to you or not. I said it wasn't a highfalutin business presentation because you got people in this room right now who can give you that. But my story is one that brings me from a spot that is perhaps an unlikely spot to where I am right now.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.